Have you ever walked into a room knowing you were the most powerful person there until you saw the one face that could break you? The Opal Room didn't do subtlety. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across white tablecloths that probably cost more to launder than most people spent on groceries. The kind of place where waiters moved like ghosts and every fork had a job. Chicago's Gold Coast, where money didn't talk because it didn't have to. David Jones sat at table 12 with 3 men from Manhattan who'd flown in that morning and would fly out tonight. The deal spread between wine glasses like a hand of cards nobody wanted to fold. $50 million, acquisition papers, signatures that would put his tech company on every business headline from here to Hong Kong. He wore charcoal tailored so sharp it could draw blood. Patek Philippe on his wrist caught the light when he reached for his pen. 38 years old. Black, self-made, the kind of success story people wrote about when they wanted to prove the system worked. The room had gone quiet when he entered, not because he demanded it. Presence like his didn't ask permission. Lead investor leaned across the table. White guy, 50s, receding hairline and a tie that cost 4 figures. Voice low like they were sharing secrets. "Jones, we need signatures tonight. Boards breathing down our necks." David nodded once, picked up the pen, glanced at the contract one more time because you don't sign $50 million without reading twice. That's when he looked up. The woman carrying champagne flutes on a tray wobbled near table 7. 8 months pregnant if David was guessing, maybe more. Belly sat high under a black server's apron that didn't quite fit. Ankles swollen over worn flats that had seen better decades. Face thinner than it should be. Cheekbones too sharp. Eyes too careful. She saw him. Tray wobbled. David's pen stopped moving. Michelle Martin, his ex-wife, the one who walked out 9 months ago with a suitcase and a lie about a man from London who could give her the life David never would. Now she was here, pregnant, serving champagne to people who tipped more than she probably made in a week. The investors kept talking, something about quarterly projections. David didn't hear a word. Just watched Michelle squeeze between tables like every step hurt. Watched her try to hide the tremor in her hands. Watched the tray rattle anyway. Then Brian Thompson appeared. Manager. Mid-40s. White. Thinning hair slicked back with too much product. Tight suit that said he thought he mattered more than he did. His voice cut through the silverware clink loud enough tables turned. "If you can't keep pace, pregnant or not, there's the door." Michelle flinched. Not dramatic, just defeated. Like she'd heard it before and knew arguing made it worse. David's chair scraped marble. Investors froze mid-sip. Michelle's eyes found his across the room, whispered something that looked like his name, shook her head once, pleading. "David, don't." But what no one in that room knew was why she left. 9 months ago. Lincoln Park penthouse. Rain hammering floor-to-ceiling windows like it was trying to get in. David standing in the kitchen with the scotch he hadn't touched because his hands didn't trust themselves. Michelle slid divorce papers across the granite island. Her hands shook so hard the pages rattled. "I'm leaving." David set the glass down slow. Didn't look at her. Looked at the skyline through the rain. Buildings lit up like they had answers. "Leaving. There's someone else." Her voice cracked on the word someone. "From London. He's offering me—" Pause. Breath. "A life you can't." David turned then, looked at her straight. "You're lying." She wouldn't meet his eyes. Stared past his shoulder at the rain, at the city, anywhere but him. "Look at me, Michelle." She didn't. "Just sign." He did. Black ink across the line where his name belonged. Hand steady because he wouldn't let it shake. Wouldn't give her that. She was still wearing his mother's necklace. Gold locket on a thin chain. Photo of David at 6 years old inside. Gap-toothed smile. His mother's last gift before the lung cancer took her. Michelle walked to the door. Didn't look back. Didn't say anything else. Door clicked shut. David stood in that kitchen until the scotch went warm in his hand and the rain stopped and the sun came up painting everything gold like the world hadn't just ended. He didn't break down, didn't call, didn't beg. He built. expanded the company 40% in 6 months, worked until 2 every morning, closed deals other people said were impossible. Board members started calling him the machine, meant it as a compliment. David took it as one. Didn't date, didn't talk about Michelle, just worked. Now here she was, present day, the Opal Room. David standing at table 12 while investors stared and Brian Thompson blocked Michelle's path to the kitchen. Brian's voice climbed another notch, making sure people heard. Pregnancy isn't a free pass. You drop one glass, one customer complains, you're done. Michelle's knuckles went white on the tray edge, glasses tilted, started sliding. David moved, 3 strides, caught the tray before it fell, set it on a side table like it weighed nothing, turned to Brian, didn't raise his voice. Say that again. Brian's smirk faltered, recognition flickered behind his eyes, the kind of look people get when they realize they just made a mistake that's going to cost them. Mr. Jones, this is an employee. You're humiliating a pregnant woman. David's tone stayed level, colder that way. In front of paying customers. In front of me. One of the investors cleared his throat, muttered something about the deal, about time, about schedules. David didn't look at them, kept his eyes on Brian. Your name?
Where were you on the
Brian Thompson. David nodded once, filed it away. You apologize to her right now. Or, I explained to your owner why this place just became a liability. Michelle grabbed David's sleeve, fingers ice cold through the fabric even in the warm restaurant, voice barely above a whisper. Stop, please. You don't know what you're... He looked at her then, really looked. Chemical burns along her knuckles, red and cracked, the kind you get from cheap cleaners that eat through skin, nails bitten to the quick. Dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. Cheeks hollow, hair pulled back in a ponytail that used to be glossy, and now just looked tired. This wasn't the woman who left him 9 months ago with designer luggage and a story about European lovers. This was someone who'd been surviving, barely. Brian opened his mouth, probably to say something that would make it worse. David cut him off with a look. I'll be back to finish this conversation. Not a threat, a promise. Then he followed Michelle. She bolted, through the dining room, past tables that pretended not to watch, through the swinging kitchen door where line cooks shouted orders in Spanish and steam rose from pots that smelled like butter and wine, out the back exit, alley behind the Opal Room, cold Chicago wind whipping between buildings, dumpster stink mixing with diesel from delivery trucks, distant traffic hum, city noise that never really stopped. Michelle leaned against brick, one hand on her belly, breathing hard like she'd run a marathon instead of 50 feet. David stepped into the alley, let the door swing shut behind him. Where is he? Voice tight, controlled. Your London guy. Where the hell is he while you're scrubbing floors in Chicago? Michelle shook her head, wouldn't look at him, stared at the cracked asphalt instead. None of your business. Is that baby mine? No. Too fast, too automatic, like she'd rehearsed it. David stepped closer, not threatening, just closing distance. You're lying. Michelle's face went white. She grabbed the wall. My head, I can't. Vision doubled. She blinked hard, tried to clear it, couldn't. Ankles so swollen her shoes cut into skin, blood pressure spiking, headache like someone driving nails through her skull. David caught her as her knees buckled. Up close he saw everything, really saw it. Not just the burns on her hands, but the scars, fresh ones, old ones, cracked knuckles that hadn't healed right, fingernails split down to the quick, wrists too thin, collarbone jutting out like she hadn't eaten enough in months. She whispered before her eyes rolled back, voice so quiet he almost missed it. Don't let them find me. Who? David lowered her to the asphalt, gentle, like she might shatter. Michelle, who's them? She didn't answer, just went limp. Something fell from her apron pocket when David shifted her weight. Pawn shop receipt, crumpled, stained with what looked like coffee. David picked it up, read it. Gold locket with photo. $8,000. His mother's necklace. The one Michelle wore the day she walked out of his life. She'd sold it. David pulled out his phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers, gave the address, said the words, "pregnant woman and unconscious," and "hurry." Then he sat in that alley with Michelle's head in his lap and tried to understand how the woman who claimed she'd found someone better was now selling family heirlooms to survive. Ambulance arrived, sirens screaming. Paramedics spilled out with a gurney and equipment that looked too complicated. They strapped Michelle down, clipped an oxygen mask over her face. One of them checked her vitals and swore under his breath. Blood pressure's 180/115, preeclampsia, probably severe. David climbed into the ambulance without asking. Nobody stopped him. He sat on the bench while they worked, watched them hook up IVs, listened to medical jargon he didn't understand, kept his eyes on Michelle's face. Even unconscious, her lips moved. He leaned closer. She was whispering, over and over, same words on a loop. "Protect him. Protect David." David's throat closed. He pulled out his phone again, dialed a different number. Christopher Hernandez picked up on the first ring. Black attorney, early 50s. Been with David since the startup days when they shared a windowless office in Pilsen and ate ramen because that's all they could afford. "Christopher, I need a full background on Michelle Martin, last 9 months, addresses, jobs, bank activity, people she's been in contact with." Pause. Sound of sheets rustling. Christopher checking the time. "David, it's 1 in the morning. I know what time it is." David watched a paramedic adjust Michelle's IV. "How fast can you move?" 2 hours, maybe less." "Do it." David hung up, looked at Michelle again, her face pale under the oxygen mask, belly rising and falling with shallow breaths. His phone buzzed. Text from the lead investor. "Jones, where the hell are you? We close tonight or we walk?" David typed back, "Walk." Deleted it. Rewrote, "I'll call you tomorrow." Investor replied immediately, "There is no tomorrow. You just torched a $50 million deal." David turned the phone face down. Didn't reply. Ambulance pulled up to Northwestern Memorial. ER entrance. Automatic doors. Fluorescent lights. Smell of antiseptic and floor wax. They wheeled Michelle inside. David followed until a nurse stopped him with a hand on his chest. "Sir, we need to take her to surgery. You can't come back here." David looked past her at Michelle disappearing through double doors. "Is she going to be okay?" Nurse's face said she didn't know. "We're doing everything we can." Not an answer. David knew that. Took it anyway because what choice did he have? They directed him to a waiting room. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor, vending machine humming in the corner. TV mounted on the wall playing news. Nobody watched. David sat, stared at nothing. Phone buzzed again. "Christopher." David answered. "Talk to me." Christopher didn't waste time. "She never left Chicago." David straightened. "What?" "No passport stamps, no international flights, no travel records at all. Michelle's been living in a studio apartment on 63rd Street, South Side, $350 a month. Landlord says the heat only works half the time. Roof leaks when it rains." David stood. Blood drained from his face so fast he had to grip the back of the chair. Why would she lie? Christopher's voice tightened. "I found bank transfers, 8 months of them, $2,500 every month, always to the same 2 accounts." "Whose?" Pause. Long enough David knew he wouldn't like what came next. "Ronald Sanchez and Timothy Clark." David stopped breathing. Those names weren't strangers. 3 years ago, Ronald and Timothy tried a hostile takeover of David's company, went after board members, tried to turn shareholders, spread rumors about financial instability, played dirty. David outmaneuvered them. Every move, every counter-move, ended with Ronald and Timothy losing $40 million and their reputations. Last thing Ronald said before walking out of that boardroom, voice shaking with rage, face red, spit flying. "You took everything from us, Jones. We'll return the favor, starting with what you love most." David thought it was empty posturing, wounded pride, men who'd lost big making threats they couldn't back up. He was wrong. Have you ever realized the person you thought betrayed you was actually saving your life? Christopher kept talking, words coming faster now. I pulled her text records, burner numbers, threats going back 10 months. They told her if she didn't leave you, if she didn't sign those papers, they'd frame you for federal fraud, 20 years minimum. David leaned his forehead against the cold hospital wall, closed his eyes. She sold her wedding ring 6 months ago. Diamond solitaire, $12,000. Your mother's necklace 4 months ago, $8,000. Worked 3 jobs while pregnant, cleaning offices at night, waitressing during the day, babysitting on weekends. Every dollar went to Ronald and Timothy. Christopher's voice dropped, softer now, almost gentle. David, she didn't betray you. She took the hit for you. David's hand tightened on the phone so hard the case creaked. All those months, replaying the divorce in his head, convincing himself she'd chosen money over him, that she'd found someone who could give her the life he couldn't, that she was shallow, selfish, a gold digger who got bored. But she never left the city, never left the country, never found another man, just bled herself dry paying off his enemies to keep him safe. And he'd let her. Nurse stepped out of the OR, scrub speckled with blood, tired eyes behind surgical mask. Mr. Jones? David turned, phone still pressed to his ear. You have a son, 4 pounds, 3 ounces. He's in the NICU. David's throat closed, couldn't speak, just nodded. And Michelle? Nurse pulled down her mask. Face said more than words. Critical, still in surgery, lost a lot of blood. We're doing everything we can. Not an answer. Again. David hung up on Christopher, didn't say goodbye, just walked, followed signs to the NICU, 4th floor, east wing, security door with a keypad. Nurse buzzed him through when he said his name. Inside everything was dim, quiet, beeping monitors, humming machines, incubators lined up like cars in a lot. Nurse led him to the 3rd one from the left. David stopped, looked through the clear plastic. Baby boy, 4 pounds, 3 ounces, black skin, tiny fists curled near his face, breathing tube taped across his cheek, wires running from his chest to monitors that showed heartbeat and oxygen and things David didn't understand. So small, fragile, fighting. Nurse touched his arm. He's strong, came out breathing on his own. That's a good sign. David pressed his palm against the incubator. Warm plastic. What's his name? Nurse checked a chart. She named him Isaiah, before they took her to surgery. David's vision blurred. Isaiah, his grandfather's name. The man who raised his mother after her parents died, who taught David to read before kindergarten, who told him he could be anything he wanted if he worked hard enough and didn't let anyone tell him different. Isaiah, salvation of the Lord. Michelle remembered, even after everything, even while she was selling his mother's jewelry and working herself to exhaustion, even while she was lying to him to keep him safe. She remembered what mattered. David stood there watching his son breathe, watched the monitors beep, watched nurses move between incubators checking vitals and adjusting tubes. Phone buzzed. Text from one of the investors. Jones, final offer. We wait until tomorrow night. After that, the deal's dead. David typed back. Let it die. Sent it. Turned the phone off. $50 million. Gone. Board would be furious. Shareholders would panic. Business press would write stories about David Jones losing his edge. Didn't matter. None of it mattered. Because Michelle was in surgery fighting for her life. Because his son was in an incubator weighing 4 pounds. Because for 9 months he'd been angry at the wrong person. David sat in a chair beside Isaiah's incubator, watched his chest rise and fall, mechanical rhythm that meant life. Hours passed. Nurses changed shifts. Morning light started creeping through windows at the end of the hall. Christopher showed up around 6, carrying coffee David didn't ask for, sat in the chair beside him without speaking. They watched Isaiah together. Finally, Christopher broke the silence. "I got more." David didn't look away from his son. "Tell me." "Ronald and Timothy are in Miami, booked flights to the Cayman Islands, 10 days from now, probably planning to disappear once they squeeze the last payment out of Michelle." David's jaw tightened. "Can you stall them?" "I tipped the FBI, sent them what I found, threat messages, bank records. But they need hard evidence to move fast. Federal case takes time." "Then I'll get the evidence." Christopher looked at him. "David, I'll get it. Not angry, just final. Whatever it takes." Christopher nodded. Didn't argue. Knew better. They sat in silence, watched Isaiah, drank coffee that tasted like cardboard. Doctor appeared around 7. Young guy, Indian, exhausted. "Mr. Jones?" David stood. "Your wife is out of surgery." "Ex-wife." Doctor nodded, didn't care about this distinction. "She's stable, barely. Emergency C-section. Lost a lot of blood. We had to give her 3 units. Blood pressure's still dangerously high. We're monitoring for seizures." "Can I see her?" "Recovery room, 3rd floor, but she's unconscious. Probably will be for a while." David followed directions. Took stairs instead of elevator because he needed to move. Needed to do something. 3rd floor. Recovery. Pale green walls. Antiseptic smell. Machines beeping in different rooms playing different songs. Michelle in bed 4. Hooked up to monitors. IV in her arm. Oxygen tube in her nose. Face so pale it looked gray. David pulled a chair to her bedside. Sat. Took her hand. Careful. Burns on her knuckles looked fresh. Chemical red. Cracked skin. Scars layered on scars. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Didn't know if she could hear. Said it anyway. "I'm sorry I didn't see. I'm sorry I let you do this alone." Her lips moved. No sound, just movement. David leaned closer. She was still whispering, even unconscious. Still protecting him. Protect David. Keep him safe. David's chest cracked open. Years of anger. Months of resentment. All of it pouring out like blood from a wound he didn't know he had. She didn't leave him for money. She didn't leave him for another man. She left to save his life. And he convinced himself she was the villain. David sat with Michelle until visiting hours ended. Until a nurse politely but firmly told him he had to go. He went back to the NICU. Stood at Isaiah's incubator. Pressed his hand to the plastic. "Your mama's a fighter," he whispered. "Just like you. And I'm going to make sure you both are safe. I promise." Phone buzzed. David pulled it out. Text from Christopher. "Got the evidence. Michelle's lawyer kept copies of everything. Threat messages, fake fraud documents, bank transfers, all of it. FBI's moving." David closed his eyes. Breathed out slow. Justice was coming. But first he had to make sure his family survived. He looked at Isaiah. 4 pounds of determination. Black skin. His skin. Fighting to breathe. Fighting to live. David made a vow right there. Silent. Between him and God and his son who couldn't hear but maybe understood anyway. Ronald and Timothy took 9 months from them. David was going to take the rest of their lives. 3 in the morning. NICU waiting room. David sat under buzzing fluorescent lights that made everything look sick. Phone screen glowed in his hands, casting blue shadows across his face. Christopher sent files, encrypted. David opened them one by one. Text messages first. Burner numbers. No names. Just threats typed out like shopping lists. Leave Jones or we bury him. Federal fraud charges. Prison time, 20 years minimum. Your choice. His freedom or your marriage. Clock's ticking. We're watching. 1 word to him and it's over. David scrolled. Hands steady. Jaw tight. Next message included a photo. Michelle at a pawn shop counter. South side location David recognized from the cracked tile visible through the window. Counter stacked with cash. her wedding ring in the clerk's hand, diamond catching overhead lights. Timestamp. 6 months ago. David zoomed in. Michelle's face in the background, eyes red, jaw set like she was biting through pain. Another photo. Same pawn shop, different day. Michelle sliding his mother's gold locket across the counter, clerk examining it with a jeweler's loupe. Timestamp. 4 months ago. Receipt visible in the corner. David enlarged it. Numbers came into focus. Gold locket with photograph. 18-carat chain. $8,000. Funds wired to account number 4739. David pulled up Ronald Sanchez's bank records. Christopher had sent those too. Corporate account ending in 4739. Michelle's money went straight to Ronald. Every dollar she scraped together. Every piece of jewelry she pawned. Every double shift she worked while pregnant. All of it feeding the men who were threatening to destroy David. He kept scrolling. Found employment records Christopher dug up. 3 jobs. All minimum wage. All under the table. Night janitor at an office building downtown. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Scrubbing toilets and mopping floors while her belly grew. Waitress at the Opal Room. Lunch and dinner shifts. Tips barely covering bus fare. Weekend babysitter for a family in Evanston. Watching toddlers while her own baby kicked inside her. David did the math. 60-hour weeks. Maybe 70. All while pregnant. All while paying Ronald and Timothy $2,500 a month. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Hadn't cried since his mother's funeral. 20 years ago. Northwestern Memorial. Same hospital. Different floor. Lung cancer that ate through her in 6 months. She died holding his hand, telling him to build something that mattered. He built an empire, but he didn't see the woman he loved destroying herself to protect it. Nurse walked past, slowed when she saw him, didn't stop, just kept moving, giving him space to break in private. David pulled himself together, wiped his face, stood, walked to the NICU viewing window, pressed his palm against the glass. Isaiah in his incubator, chest rising and falling with the ventilator's rhythm, wires running from his tiny body to machines that beeped and hummed, black skin, David's skin, fighting to breathe, fighting to live. "I'm sorry," David whispered to the glass, to his son who couldn't hear. "I should have known, should have looked for her, should have asked questions instead of believing the lie." Isaiah's monitor beeped. Steady. Strong for someone so small. David's phone buzzed. Text from Christopher. FBI wants to meet. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. They need your statement. David typed back. I'll be there. Morning came. David didn't sleep. Just sat with Isaiah. Watched nurses change shifts. Watched them check vitals and adjust tubes and whisper to each other about the tiny fighter in Incubator 3. 7 a.m. Doctor appeared, same one from the night before, still looked exhausted. "Mr. Jones, your wife's awake." David stood. "Ex-wife." Doctor nodded, didn't care about semantics. "She's asking for the baby." David followed him to Michelle's room. 3rd floor. Recovery wing. Door open. Machines beeping. Michelle propped up in bed looking small against white sheets. Her eyes found his, widened, panicked. "Where's my baby? Is he—" David stepped into view. "He's alive. NICU. Fighting." Michelle started crying, not loud, just tears streaming down her face while she tried to breathe through it. "You shouldn't be here," her voice cracked. "If they find out—" David pulled a chair to her bedside. Sat. "Ronald Sanchez and Timothy Clark." "I know." Michelle's face crumbled, the lie collapsing. 9 months of pretending shattered in 4 words. She turned away, looked at the wall. Couldn't meet his eyes. "Tell me." David kept his voice level. Not angry, just tired. "All of it." Michelle's hands twisted the hospital blanket, pulled it tight across her lap like armor that wouldn't hold. 10 months ago. They found me at yoga." David waited. Showed me documents. Bank records with your name. Offshore accounts. Wire transfers to shell companies in Panama. All fake but good enough to fool investigators. Her voice went hollow, reciting facts like reading someone else's story. Said if I didn't leave you, they'd send everything to the FBI. Told me you'd lose the company, your freedom, 20 years in federal prison for fraud you didn't commit. David's hands clenched. Michelle didn't see, still staring at the wall. I hired a lawyer, used my savings, asked what would happen if I divorced you. Pause, breath shaking. He said if we weren't married, I couldn't be compelled to testify, that you'd be safer if I wasn't connected to you anymore. Michelle finally looked at him, eyes red, swollen. So I left. Made up the story about London because I knew you'd believe it. Knew you'd think I chose money over you. Knew you'd hate me. Tears running faster now. She didn't wipe them away. Sold my ring. 12,000. Sent it to Ronald. He said it bought me a month. Then he wanted more. David reached for her hand. She pulled back, shook her head. Sold your mother's necklace. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I needed the money, and they said if I didn't pay... Her voice broke. Couldn't finish. David took her hand anyway. Gentle, careful of the burns and scars and cracked knuckles. You should have trusted me. Michelle's jaw tightened. I did. That's why I left. Silence stretched. Machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall someone laughed. Wrong sound for a hospital. David stared at their joined hands, her skin rough against his. If you'd known the truth, you would have fought back. Michelle's voice barely above a whisper. And they would have destroyed you. So I made the choice for both of us. David's grip tightened. Not hard, just there. You gave up everything. I gave up 9 months. You would have lost 20 years. The math hit different when she put it that way. David stood, leaned over the bed rail, kissed her forehead. First time he'd touched her like that in almost a year. I'm going to fix this, he murmured against her skin. Ronald and Timothy, they're done. Michelle grabbed his wrist. David, don't. They have connections, lawyers. If you go after them... I'm not going after them. David pulled back, met her eyes. The FBI is... FBI field office, South Loop, 9 a.m. sharp. David sat across a metal table from 2 agents. White woman in her 40s, black man maybe 30, both wearing suits that looked off the rack but clean. Woman did the talking. Agent Morrison had that look of someone who'd heard every lie and stopped being surprised. Mr. Jones, thank you for coming in. David nodded. Christopher sat beside him, briefcase on his lap, ready. We've reviewed the materials your attorney provided. Text messages, bank transfers, employment records for Michelle Martin. It's compelling. Morrison slid a folder across the table. David opened it. Photos of Ronald and Timothy, recent ones. Looked like surveillance shots. Ronald at a Miami hotel pool. Timothy getting into a black Mercedes. Both men tanned, relaxed, living well on Michelle's money. We've been watching these two for 18 months. Morrison tapped the photos. Different case. Securities fraud. But we couldn't make it stick. Witnesses got cold feet. Evidence went missing. They're good at covering tracks. The black agent leaned forward. Agent Delaney, younger, hungry. Your ex-wife's case changes things. Federal extortion, coercion, interstate wire fraud. And there's a pattern now. We found 2 other victims. Business competitors of Sanchez and Clark. Same playbook, same threats. David's jaw clenched. How many people did they do this to? Morrison shrugged. We're still digging. But with your statement and the documentary evidence, we can move fast. How fast? They're flying to Grand Cayman in 8 days. We arrest them before the flight. David leaned back. What do you need from me? Formal statement. On record. Everything your ex-wife told you. Everything you know about their history with your company. Christopher opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope. We've prepared a timeline, 3 years of interactions, the hostile takeover attempt, board meetings, email correspondence, everything documented. Morrison took the envelope, flipped through it, eyebrows raised. This is thorough. Christopher's face stayed neutral. We don't do things halfway. Next 3 hours, David talked, gave dates, names, details. Morrison recorded everything. Delaney took notes by hand, old school. They broke for lunch, sandwiches from a deli down the street. David couldn't taste anything, just chewed and swallowed and kept going. Afternoon session focused on Michelle, what she'd told David in the hospital, the jobs, the payments, the fear. Morrison stopped the recording, leaned back in her chair. Mr. Jones, I need to ask, why didn't your ex-wife come to us 10 months ago, before she paid them anything? David had wondered the same thing. She thought she was protecting me, thought if she paid them off, they'd leave me alone. But they never do. Morrison's voice carried weight, experience. Men like Sanchez and Clark, they bleed you dry and then they come back for more. David thought about Michelle in that alley, collapsed, pregnant, still whispering his name like a prayer. She knows that now. They finished around 4. Morrison walked David and Christopher to the elevator. We'll be in touch. Probably move within the week. I'll need you available for testimony if this goes to trial. David shook her hand. Whatever you need. Elevator doors closed. Christopher exhaled. First time he'd relaxed all day. You did good. David didn't feel good, just felt tired. How long until they're in cuffs? Morrison said a week, maybe less. Federal prosecutors don't move unless they're sure, and they're sure. David checked his phone, text from the hospital, Michelle's blood pressure stabilizing, Isaiah gaining an ounce. Small victories. Christopher dropped David at Northwestern, pulled up to the main entrance. Get some rest. You look like hell. David climbed out. I'll rest when they're in prison. He went straight to the NICU. Michelle was there, in a wheelchair. Nurse must have brought her up. She sat beside Isaiah's incubator, one hand pressed against the plastic, watching him breathe. David stood in the doorway. Didn't want to interrupt. Michelle sensed him anyway. Turned. He's beautiful. David walked over, stood beside her wheelchair, looked at his son. He is. I wanted to tell you, Michelle's voice quiet. When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to call you so many times. Why didn't you? They said if I contacted you, they'd move up the timeline, send the fake documents to the FBI immediately. I couldn't risk it. David pulled up a chair, sat beside her, both of them watching Isaiah now. Christopher found 2 other victims. Business people Ronald and Timothy extorted. Same threats, same playbook. Michelle's hand dropped from the incubator. How many lives did they ruin? Enough. FBI's building a case. They'll arrest them before they can run. When? Soon. Michelle was quiet for a long time, just watched Isaiah, monitors beeping, ventilator humming. Finally she spoke. I need you to understand something. David waited. I didn't do this to be a hero. I didn't do it because I'm noble or brave or any of that. Michelle's voice cracked. I did it because I was terrified, because I couldn't imagine a world where you were in prison and I was free. Because that felt worse than lying. Worse than being poor. Worse than anything. David took her burned hand, held it. The people who seem coldest are often protecting the ones they love most. Michelle looked at him then, really looked. You can't forgive me this easy. It's not fair. Fair? David almost laughed. You spent 9 months in hell to keep me safe. What's fair about that? I lied to you. You saved me. Michelle shook her head, tears falling again. I broke us. David leaned closer. Then we'll build something new. Nurse appeared, interrupted the moment. Ms. Martin, we need to get you back to your room. Doctor's orders. Michelle nodded. Let the nurse wheel her away. Looked back at David once. He couldn't read her face. David stayed with Isaiah. Watched the sun set through the NICU windows, city lights coming on, Chicago at dusk, beautiful and brutal. His phone buzzed. Christopher, Ronald and Timothy just changed their flight, leaving tomorrow instead of next week. FBI's moving tonight. David texted back. Where? Miami. Hotel raid. Arrest on federal warrant. You want to watch? David looked at Isaiah. Tiny chest rising and falling, fighting for every breath. No. I need to be here, Christopher replied. Understood. I'll call when it's done. David settled into the chair, prepared for a long night, 2,200 hours. Phone rang. Christopher's voice tight, controlled. They got them, both in custody. Tried to run. FBI had the hotel surrounded. David closed his eyes. What happens now? Arraignment tomorrow. Federal courthouse in Miami. They'll be transferred to Chicago after. Charges? Federal extortion. Interstate wire fraud. Conspiracy. RICO predicates based on the pattern with other victims. Looking at 15 to 20, minimum. David opened his eyes, looked at Isaiah. Good. There's more. They found evidence. Emails, documents, plans for other targets. Ronald and Timothy were running a whole operation. Your case breaks it wide open. David absorbed that. How many people? At least 6 we know about. More coming forward now that arrests went public. 6 families, 6 lives disrupted, all because 2 men couldn't handle losing. David, you still there? Yeah, just thinking. About what? David watched a nurse adjust Isaiah's IV gentle hands, practiced movements. About how close I came to losing everything. How if Michelle hadn't done what she did, I'd be in cuffs instead of them. Christopher was quiet for a beat. She loved you enough to be the villain in your story. That's rare. After the call, David sat in the dark. NICU lights dimmed for night shift, monitors glowing. Babies sleeping or crying softly. Isaiah made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like a question. David pressed his hand to the incubator. Your mama's tougher than both of us combined. And smarter, definitely smarter. Isaiah's tiny hand moved, fingers flexing, reaching for something that wasn't there. I'm going to make sure you know her story. The real one, not the lie, not the version I believed. The truth. David pulled out his phone, scrolled to contacts, found the hospital administrator's number, dialed. 3 rings, sleepy voice. Hello? This is David Jones. I'm in your NICU right now. My son Isaiah is in incubator 3. Administrator woke up fast. Mr. Jones, is everything all right? I want to fund an upgrade, new equipment, more staff, whatever this unit needs to save more babies like mine. Silence. Then, that's very generous. Are you sure? How much? For a comprehensive upgrade? New ventilators, monitors, staff training, probably $500,000. David didn't hesitate. Make it $1 million, and set up a fund, so families don't have to choose between gas money and visiting their kids. Administrator's voice changed, professional to something softer. Mr. Jones, that's going to help a lot of people. Good. Have the paperwork ready tomorrow. David hung up, looked at Isaiah. Your first lesson, he whispered. Power means nothing if you use it to build walls instead of bridges. Isaiah slept. Didn't hear. But maybe someday David would tell him how his mother sacrificed everything. How his father almost lost what mattered chasing what didn't. Morning arrived. David hadn't slept. Just watched Isaiah through the night, counted breaths, watched monitors, prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Doctor did rounds at 7, checked Isaiah's vitals, nodded. He's doing well, gaining weight, breathing better. If he keeps this up, we might be able to reduce ventilator support in a few days. David's chest loosened. First time in hours. That's good. It's very good. He's a fighter. After the doctor left, David went to see Michelle. Found her awake, staring at the ceiling. They arrested Ronald and Timothy last night. David stood in the doorway. FBI raided their hotel in Miami. Michelle turned her head, looked at him. Are they going to prison? Federal charges, 15 to 20 years minimum. Michelle's face didn't change. No relief, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. It doesn't feel like winning. David understood that, crossed to her bed, sat in the chair. Because you lost 9 months. Because you're lying in a hospital bed. Because our son is fighting for his life. Because I hurt you. Michelle's voice broke. I hurt you and you still came back. You saved me. There's a difference. Michelle shook her head, tears sliding sideways across her temples into her hair. I don't know how to live with what I did, how to look at you without seeing the lie. David took her hand, burned and scarred and beautiful. Then don't look back. Look forward, at Isaiah, at what we're going to build. We're not married anymore, so we'll figure something else out. Michelle laughed, bitter, raw. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. Nothing about this is simple, but giving up is simpler, and I'm done with simple. Nurse brought breakfast, oatmeal and orange juice and toast that looked like cardboard. Michelle picked at it, ate a few bites, gave up. David's phone rang. Christopher again. Arraignment's done. Both denied bail, flight risk. They'll be transferred to Chicago tomorrow. Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. David stepped into the hallway. What are their lawyers saying? Trying to negotiate, offering to cooperate, give up other players. Prosecutors aren't biting. They have everything they need. Good. Let them rot. Christopher paused. David, I need to tell you something. The board called. Emergency meeting. They want to discuss your absence. David leaned against the wall, closed his eyes. They want to remove me. They want to discuss leadership transition, given recent events. Translation. They wanted him out. Tell them I'll attend, remotely, tomorrow. David, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because if I don't, they'll say I abandoned the company, and everything Michelle did will be for nothing. Christopher sighed. Okay, I'll set it up. David hung up, went back to Michelle's room. She looked at his face. What's wrong? Board meeting tomorrow. They're worried about leadership. Michelle sat up straighter. They're going to fire you. They're going to try. David, you can't lose the company. Not after everything. It's just a company. David sat down. You and Isaiah. That's what matters. Michelle stared at him. Who are you, and what did you do with David Jones? He smiled. First time in days. I'm the guy who finally figured out what's actually worth fighting for. Day 5. Isaiah's infection spiked. Temperature climbing. Nurses moving faster. Doctor called in. David stood at the incubator, watching them work, feeling helpless. Michelle arrived in her wheelchair. Nurse must have brought her despite protests. What's happening? Doctor didn't look up, adjusting medication. Infection. His immune system's too weak. We're doing everything we can. Michelle's face went white. Is he going to? We're doing everything we can. Not an answer. Same non-answer doctors gave when they didn't know. Hours passed. Isaiah's temperature climbed, 103.5, monitors screaming, nurses adjusting medications, trying different combinations, nothing working. David sat beside Michelle's wheelchair, neither speaking, just watching their son fight. 2 a.m, heart rate dropped, alarms blaring, nurses flooding in, doctor shouting orders. Michelle tried to stand. David held her back. She screamed, actual sound ripping from her throat, raw, primal. Mother watching her child die. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. Doctor stepped out, mask pulled down, exhausted. We stabilized him. But it's hour by hour now. Michelle collapsed into David's chest, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. David held her, first time in 9 months, felt her weight against him, her grief, her fear. He's going to make it. David's voice rough. He's a Jones. We don't quit. Michelle pulled back, eyes red, swollen. If he doesn't, it's my fault. I stressed too much, worked too hard. David cut her off, firm. Stop. This is on Ronald, on Timothy, on me for not seeing the truth, not you. Michelle shook her head. David tilted her face up, made her look at him. Listen to me. You carried him for 8 months while working 3 jobs, while being threatened, while paying off extortionists. You kept him alive when anyone else would have broken. If he makes it, it's because of you, not despite you. Michelle's lip trembled. I'm so tired of being strong. Then let me be strong for both of us. They sat there, hospital room, machines beeping, city lights through the window, 2 broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. Dawn came. Isaiah's temperature dropped. 99.2. Not normal, but better. Doctor checked on him, cautiously optimistic. Crisis passed, for now. David and Michelle stayed with him all day, watching, waiting, hoping. Evening. Christopher called. Board meeting's set, tomorrow, 10 a.m., video conference. David looked at Isaiah, still fighting, still breathing. I'll be there. Christopher hesitated. David, they're going to come at you hard. Stock price dropped when news broke about the FBI investigation. Shareholders are panicking. Let them panic. I'm not stepping down. Even if they vote you out? David thought about that. Thought about the company he'd built, the empire, the power. Thought about Michelle selling his mother's necklace, working herself to exhaustion, lying to save his life. Even if they vote me out. Because justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. 10 a.m. David set up his laptop in the NICU family room. Video screen showed 12 board members, all white except 1, all old except 2, all looking at him like he'd betrayed them. Chairman spoke first. Gerald Hoffman, old money, new money, all the money. David, thank you for joining us. I'll be direct. The board has concerns. David kept his face neutral. I'm listening. You walked out on a $50 million acquisition, left investors standing, disappeared for a week, stock price dropped 18%. Shareholders are filing complaints. Another board member jumped in. Sandra Voss, steel magnate, ruthless. We need steady leadership, not someone who abandons critical deals for personal drama. Personal drama. Like Michelle's life was inconvenient. David leaned forward. Let me tell you what happened. My ex-wife was being extorted by 2 men who tried to destroy this company 3 years ago. They threatened to frame me for federal fraud. She left me to keep me safe. Paid them $22,000 while working 3 jobs and pregnant. Nearly died bringing our son into the world. Those men were arrested 6 days ago. They're facing 20 years in federal prison. Silence. David continued. So yes, I walked out on a deal, because the woman who saved my life was dying, and if any of you have a problem with that, I'll accept your resignation. Hoffman's face reddened. You can't. Actually, I can. I own 41% of this company, largest single shareholder. You work for me, not the other way around. Voss leaned forward. Shareholders will revolt. You'll be sued. Let them sue. I'll tell them the same thing. Some things matter more than money. Board member in the back, younger guy, tech background, spoke up. David, I think what you did was right. Family first. Family. Always. Hoffman glared at him. This isn't about morality. It's about fiduciary duty. David had enough. I'll make this simple. I'm not stepping down. I'm not taking a leave. I'm running this company. If you don't like it, there's the door. Meeting ended. David closed the laptop, hands shaking. Christopher called 2 minutes later. That was either brilliant or career suicide. Don't care which. David stood, stretched. How are they reacting? 3 board members called. Want to support you. 2 want your head. Rest are waiting to see which way the wind blows. Tell the ones who support me I appreciate it. Tell the others they're welcome to try. David went back to the NICU. Michelle was there, sitting beside Isaiah's incubator. She looked up when he entered. How'd it go? I told them the truth. Let them decide what to do with it. Michelle studied his face. You're different. How so? You used to care what people thought. Now you don't. David sat beside her. I care what you think, what Isaiah thinks. Rest is noise. Michelle was quiet. Then, I'm not ready to trust you again. Not yet. David nodded. I know. But I want to be. Someday. Then we'll get there. Slow. Michelle reached for his hand. Hesitant. David took it, careful of the scars. They sat like that, watching their son breathe, building something new from the wreckage of what broke. 10 days post-arrest. Christopher called with news. Prosecutors offered a deal. Ronald and Timothy can plead guilty. 15 years, no trial. David put him on speaker. Michelle listening from her hospital bed. She was stronger now. Walking, eating, blood pressure almost normal. What's the alternative? Trial. Could take a year. But if convicted, looking at 25 to 30 with the RICO charges. Michelle spoke. What do they recommend? Take the deal. Guaranteed conviction. Ronald and Timothy go away for a long time. Other victims get closure. David looked at Michelle. What do you want? Michelle thought about it. I want them in prison. I don't care how they get there. David told Christopher. Take the deal. End this. Papers were signed. Plea hearing scheduled. 2 weeks. Isaiah kept improving. Came off the ventilator, breathing on his own. Gained weight, 4 pounds 5 ounces, then 4 pounds 8. Almost 5. Doctor said maybe another week. Then he could go home. Michelle was discharged. David brought her to his penthouse. Set her up in the guest room. Didn't push, didn't assume. She stood in the living room, looking at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Same view where she'd left the divorce papers. I can't stay here long-term. David nodded. I know. Just until you're strong enough. Michelle turned. Where will I go? Anywhere you want. I'll help. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's me making sure my son's mother has a safe place to live. Michelle's eyes narrowed. Our son. David smiled. Our son. Progress. Small but real. Federal courthouse, Chicago, plea hearing. David and Michelle sat in the gallery, Christopher beside them. Ronald Sanchez and Timothy Clark were brought in. Orange jumpsuits, hands cuffed, eyes down. Judge read the charges: federal extortion, interstate wire fraud, conspiracy. How do you plead? Ronald spoke first, voice shaking. Guilty, Your Honor. Timothy next, barely audible. Guilty. Judge nodded. Sentencing in 30 days. Remanded into custody. Guards led them out. Ronald looked at Michelle once. She stared back. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Outside the courthouse. Reporters waiting. Cameras. Questions shouted. David kept his arm around Michelle, guided her to the car. Christopher ran interference. One reporter got through. Mr. Jones, how does it feel to see your enemies go to prison? David stopped, looked at the camera. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like barely surviving. Michelle squeezed his hand. They got in the car. Christopher drove. Nobody spoke. That night, David sat with Michelle on the penthouse balcony. Chicago spread out below. Lights, traffic, life moving forward. Tomorrow we bring Isaiah home. Michelle's voice quiet. Then what? David thought about that. Then we figure out how to be parents, how to be in each other's lives, how to trust again. In that order? in whatever order works. Michelle was quiet, watching the city. Finally. I don't know how to forgive myself. David turned to her. Then start by forgiving me. For not seeing. For not looking. For believing the worst instead of asking questions. Michelle looked at him. You didn't know. I should have. They sat there. Two people trying to bridge 9 months and 1,000,000 miles of pain. Real reconciliation isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day and proving you mean it. David stood. I'm going to bed. Tomorrow's a big day. Michelle nodded, stayed on the balcony. David left her there, gave her space. Inside, he checked his phone. Email from the board. Stock price recovering. Shareholders calming down. Chairman Hoffman submitted his resignation. David deleted it. Didn't care anymore. He was going to bring his son home tomorrow. Everything else was just noise. 8 weeks post-birth. Isaiah reached 5 pounds. Doctor signed discharge papers. David carried the car seat to the NICU, hands shaking. Michelle walked beside him. First time she'd been steady on her feet in weeks. Nurse showed them how to buckle Isaiah in, how to support his head, how to check if the straps were too tight or too loose. Isaiah looked impossibly small in the carrier, black skin against white padding, eyes closed, breathing steady, no tubes, no wires, just a baby going home. You'll do fine, the nurse whispered, smiled like she meant it. He's a fighter. You saw that already. David lifted the carrier, weight of his son in his hands, responsibility that felt heavier than any deal he'd ever closed. Michelle grabbed the diaper bag. Hospital had loaded it with formula and diapers and instructions printed on paper that felt too official, like they were trusting them with something breakable. They were. Penthouse nursery. David had it set up while Michelle recovered. Crib, changing table, rocking chair by the window, soft blues and grays, nothing loud, nothing harsh. Michelle stood in the doorway, taking it in. You did all this? Had help, interior designer, told her to make it calm. Michelle walked to the crib, ran her hand along the railing. It's perfect. David set Isaiah's carrier on the floor, knelt beside it, unbuckled the straps careful like defusing a bomb, lifted his son out. Isaiah made a small sound, not crying, just acknowledging the world had changed. David held him against his chest, one hand under his head, other supporting his back. Isaiah's weight barely registered. Warmth, though, that registered. Heat through David's shirt, proof of life. Hey, little man, David whispered. Welcome home. Michelle watched from the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. First night neither of them slept. Isaiah woke every 2 hours, hungry, wet, needing something they fumbled to provide. David made bottles, heated them to the right temperature, tested drops on his wrist like the nurse showed him. Fed Isaiah at 2 a.m., at 4, at 6. Michelle changed diapers, rocked him when he cried, hummed songs David didn't recognize, lullabies maybe, or just sounds that felt comforting. By morning they were both exhausted, sitting in the living room. Isaiah finally asleep in David's arms, Michelle on the couch, eyes closed but not sleeping. I forgot how hard this part is, Michelle's voice rough from no sleep. David looked at her. You've done this before? Michelle's eyes opened. My sister's kids. Helped when they were born. Feels like a lifetime ago. David didn't know that. Realized how much he didn't know. 9 months apart. Years before that spent working. Never asking the right questions. Tell me about them. Michelle smiled. Tired, but real. Maya and Jordan. 7 and 5 now. Live in Portland. Haven't seen them since. She stopped. Since the divorce. Since the lie. David shifted Isaiah, careful not to wake him. Maybe we could visit, when Isaiah's older. Michelle looked at him, searching for something. You'd do that? Why wouldn't I? Because they're my family, not yours. David held her gaze. You're Isaiah's mother. That makes them his family, which makes them mine. Michelle's eyes filled. She looked away, wiped at her face with the back of her hand. Progress, still moving slow, but moving. Week 2, Michelle started looking at apartments, pulled up listings on her phone, studios in neighborhoods David didn't recognize, places with security bars on windows and rent she could maybe afford if she worked full-time. She showed him one, Lincoln Park, not far from his building. This one's available next month. David looked at the listing. 300 square feet, no elevator, shared laundry in the basement. You can stay here as long as you need. I need my own place. Why? Michelle set down her phone. Because I can't live in your guest room forever. Because I need to stand on my own, because... She stopped, breathed. Because if I don't, I'll never know if I can. David understood that, didn't like it, but understood. What about Isaiah? Custody? Michelle's jaw tightened. I don't want to fight about custody. I'm not fighting. I'm asking. They stared at each other. 9 months of hurt between them. 9 weeks of trying. Neither knowing how this worked. Finally, Michelle spoke. I want him with me most of the time, but you can see him whenever. I'm not going to keep him from you. David nodded. And if I want more than just visiting? Michelle's face hardened. Then we'll need lawyers. Wrong answer. David backtracked. I don't want lawyers. I want us to figure this out like adults. Then don't threaten to take my son. Our son. And I'm not threatening. I'm trying to understand what our lives look like going forward. Michelle stood, paced to the window, looked out at the city. I don't know what they look like. I'm making this up as I go. David stood too, walked to her, didn't touch, just stood close. Then let's make it up together. Michelle turned. You keep saying things like that, like we're a team, but we're not married. We're barely even friends. So we'll be co-parents. We'll figure it out. Michelle laughed, bitter. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. Nothing about this is easy. But walking away is easier. And I'm done with easy. Michelle stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. I need time, space, to figure out who I am without you. David's chest tightened. Okay. Okay? Yeah, you need space. Take it. But Isaiah stays here until you're settled. Michelle bristled. You can't just decide. I'm not deciding. I'm offering. You find a place, get set up, then we transition. Slow. Make sure he's comfortable. Michelle searched his face, looking for the trap, the angle, found nothing but exhaustion and honesty. Okay, she finally whispered. Slow. Week 4. Sentencing hearing, federal courthouse. David went alone. Michelle stayed home with Isaiah. Didn't want to see Ronald or Timothy again. Didn't need to. Christopher met David outside, handed him coffee. Prosecutors are recommending 15. Judge could go higher. They walked through security, metal detectors, guards, the machinery of justice grinding forward. Courtroom packed. Other victims in the gallery. Business owners Ronald and Timothy had extorted, families they'd threatened. Press in the back, taking notes. Ronald Sanchez and Timothy Clark were brought in. Orange jumpsuits faded from washing. Both men had lost weight. Faces gray, eyes hollow. Judge entered. Everyone stood. Sat. Ritual and theater. Prosecutor spoke first. Laid out the case. 3 years of extortion. 6 known victims. 22,000 from Michelle alone. Hundreds of thousands total. Defense attorneys argued for leniency, mentioned families, remorse, cooperation with investigators. Judge listened, face carved from stone. Then victims spoke. Business owner from Milwaukee, lost his company fighting false accusations Ronald spread. Bankruptcy, divorce. Almost took his own life. Woman from Detroit. Timothy threatened to expose an affair if she didn't pay. She paid for 2 years, lost her house, her savings, her marriage anyway. Story after story, lives destroyed, families broken, all because 2 men couldn't handle losing. David watched Ronald and Timothy. Neither looked at the victims, just stared at the table, shoulders hunched, defeated. Judge called a recess. David stepped outside, needed air. Christopher followed. "You okay?" David leaned against the marble wall, cold stone against his back. "I keep thinking, that could have been me. If Michelle hadn't—" But it wasn't. She made sure of that. David nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Court resumed. Judge returned, looked at Ronald and Timothy. "The court has reviewed the evidence, heard testimony, considered the arguments. What you did wasn't business, wasn't competition. It was terrorism. You terrorized people who had families, dreams, lives. You destroyed them for profit." Ronald's attorney tried to interrupt. Judge silenced him with a look. "Ronald Sanchez, Timothy Clark, I sentence you each to 18 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. You will also pay full restitution to all victims, with interest." Gavel slammed. Guards led them away. Ronald looked back once, eyes finding David in the gallery. No apology, no remorse, just hate. David stared back, didn't flinch, didn't gloat, just watched them disappear. Outside, reporters swarmed. David pushed through, Christopher running interference. One question cut through. "Mr. Jones, do you feel justice was served?" David stopped, turned to the camera. "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. So yeah, justice was served." He got in the car. Christopher drove. Neither spoke. Halfway home, David's phone rang. "Michelle." "How'd it go?" 18 years, both of them." Silence. Then, "Good." Not satisfied, not relieved, just acknowledgement. "I'm coming home. Be there in 20. "Okay. Isaiah's sleeping. I made dinner." David's throat tightened. She'd made dinner. In his kitchen. Like they were a family. Maybe they were. Just a different kind than either expected. Home. Smell of pasta and garlic. Michelle in the kitchen. Wooden spoon in hand, hair pulled back. Looking almost like the woman who left 9 months ago. Almost. But different, too. Thinner. Harder. Scarred. "Smells good," David offered. Set his keys on the counter. Michelle didn't turn around, just kept stirring. "It's nothing fancy, just spaghetti." David washed his hands. "Fancy's overrated." They ate at the dining table, Isaiah in a bassinet nearby, sleeping through their quiet conversation. Michelle pushed pasta around her plate. 18 years. "Yeah. They'll be almost 60 when they get out." David thought about that. Ronald and Timothy. Mid-40s now, freedom at 60, if they made it that long. Prison wasn't kind to extortionists. "They earned it." Michelle set down her fork. "I don't feel better. Thought I would. But I don't." David reached across the table, took her hand. She didn't pull away. Healing takes longer than justice. Michelle's fingers curled around his, scars rough against his palm. "How much longer?" "However long it takes." They sat like that, holding hands across the table, Isaiah breathing softly nearby, Chicago night pressing against the windows. Progress. Still slow, but real. Week 6. Ronald's table opened. David had closed on the Opal Room 3 weeks earlier. Spent 2 weeks gutting it. New menu, new staff, new name. Michelle's table. Simple letters. Warm lighting. Nothing fancy. Just honest food at prices normal people could afford. Opening night. David invited Michelle. She came wearing a dress he'd never seen. Simple. Blue. Made her look less tired. They walked through together, David's hand on the small of her back, guiding her past tables filling with customers, past the bar where drinks were being poured, kitchen and back, Brenda Wright running the line, former waitress from the Opal Room, single mom, one of Brian Thompson's favorite targets, now head chef. David had sent her to culinary school. 3-month intensive. She'd graduated top of her class. Brenda looked up when they entered, smiled. "Mr. Jones? Miss Martin? Welcome." Michelle's eyes widened. "You did this?" David nodded. "She's talented. Just needed a chance." Michelle walked through the kitchen, taking in the gleaming equipment, the organized stations, the staff working together like they'd been doing it for years. "It's beautiful," she whispered. David led her to a private table, corner booth with a view of the whole dining room. "This is yours, whenever you want it." Michelle sat, ran her hand along the wood. "Why'd you name it after me?" "Because you were the real backbone. You saved me, even when I didn't deserve it. This is me making sure nobody forgets." Michelle's eyes filled. "David, you don't have to say anything. Just know it's here. For you. Always." Brenda brought out plates, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, comfort food, the kind Michelle's grandmother used to make. They ate slowly, watching the restaurant fill, watching people laugh and talk and enjoy food that didn't cost a week's pay. Michelle set down her fork. "I found an apartment." David's hand stilled. "Yeah?" "Wicker Park, 2-bedroom, rent controlled, move in next month." David swallowed. "That's good. You'll have space. I was thinking, maybe Isaiah could stay with you during the week. I could take weekends, until I get settled." David's chest loosened. "Whatever works for you." Michelle looked at him. "You're not going to fight me?" "Why would I fight you? You're his mother. You know what's best." Michelle's lip trembled. "I don't know what's best. I'm guessing, just like you." David reached across the table, took her hand. "Then we'll guess together." They finished dinner. David paid the check even though he owned the place. Left a tip that made the waiter's eyes go wide. Outside, Chicago spring, air warming, trees budding, city coming back to life after winter. Michelle stood on the sidewalk. "Thank you, for tonight, for the restaurant, for everything." David stepped closer. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do, because you could have walked away. After you found out the truth, could have taken Isaiah and disappeared. But you didn't." David's throat tightened. "I couldn't, even if I wanted to." Michelle looked up at him. "Why not?" "Because I still love you." Words hung in the air. Michelle's breath caught. David waited, heart pounding, exposed. Finally Michelle spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can love you back. Not yet." David nodded. "I know. But I want to try, someday. Then we'll get there, slow." Michelle stood on her toes, kissed his cheek, quick, gentle, then pulled back. "Take me home." David drove them back to the penthouse. Isaiah asleep in his car seat. Michelle quiet beside him, city lights streaming past. Home. David carried Isaiah inside, put him in the crib without waking him. Master class in gentle movements. Michelle stood in the nursery doorway, watching. "You're good at that now." David straightened. "Had good practice." Michelle walked to the crib, looked down at their son. "He's getting bigger. 5 pounds 8 ounces as of yesterday." Michelle smiled, reached in, touched Isaiah's cheek with one finger. He stirred but didn't wake. "I'm scared," she whispered. David moved beside her. "Of what?" "Of moving out, of being alone with him, of messing this up." David's hand found hers. "You won't mess it up. You're the strongest person I know." Michelle turned, looked at him in the dim nursery light. "I don't feel strong." Strength isn't about feeling. It's about doing what's necessary even when you're terrified. Michelle studied his face. When did you get so wise? David almost laughed. When I almost lost everything that mattered. They stood there, hands linked, watching Isaiah breathe, building something fragile and new from wreckage neither saw coming. 6 months later, Michelle's apartment in Wicker Park, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that let in actual light. Not the penthouse, but hers. David helped her move, carried boxes up 3 flights, assembled furniture from IKEA that required tools and patience and instructions that made no sense. Isaiah watched from his playpen, 6 months old now, 7 pounds, chubby cheeks, starting to laugh when David made faces. Michelle directed traffic, where the couch went, which wall got the bookshelf, creating order from chaos. By evening they were done, apartment looking lived in, looking like home. Michelle ordered pizza. They ate on the couch, Isaiah between them, grabbing at napkins and trying to put everything in his mouth. Thank you for helping, Michelle offered, grease on her fingers, tired smile. David wiped Isaiah's chin. Anytime. I mean it. You didn't have to. Could have hired movers. Could have. Didn't want to. Michelle set down her slice. Why not? David thought about how to explain. Because I wanted to see where Isaiah's going to grow up. Wanted to make sure it was safe. Good. Right for him. Michelle's face softened. And it's perfect. They finished eating. David cleaned up. Michelle put Isaiah down for the night. Routine they'd developed over months. Divide and conquer. When Isaiah was asleep, Michelle walked David to the door. Awkward moment, neither knowing quite how to end the night. I'll pick him up Friday, David finally offered. Michelle nodded. 6 okay? 6 works. They stood there, door open, hallway light spilling in. Michelle stepped forward, hugged him, quick but real, arms around his waist, face against his chest. David held her, careful, like holding something that might break if he squeezed too hard. Michelle pulled back. I'm glad you're here. For Isaiah. For me. Just glad. David's hand touched her face, thumb brushing her cheek. Me too. He left. Drove home. Penthouse felt empty. Too much space. Too quiet. David walked to Isaiah's nursery, still set up, crib waiting, toys scattered on the floor. He sat in the rocking chair, pulled out his phone, scrolled to photos. Michelle and Isaiah. Taken that afternoon. Her laughing, him drooling, both looking happy. Family, different than the one David imagined, but family nonetheless. 1 year later. Isaiah's first birthday. Michelle's table packed with people. Family from Portland, friends from work, Christopher and Barbara Garcia, Brenda Wright and her kids, hospital staff who saved Isaiah's life, cake shaped like a number 1, blue frosting, Isaiah's face covered in it within minutes. David stood back, watching Michelle wipe Isaiah's face while he squirmed and laughed, watching her sister help blow out candles, watching a life rebuilt from ruins. Christopher appeared beside him, beer in hand. You look happy. David took a sip of his own beer. I am. Different than I expected. Year ago you were signing $50 million deals. Now you're at a kid's birthday party in a restaurant you named after your ex-wife. David smiled. Life's funny that way. Christopher clinked his bottle against David's. To funny. They drank. Watched Isaiah destroy cake. Watched Michelle laugh harder than David had seen in months. Later, after guests left, after cleanup, Michelle sat across from David at their corner table, Isaiah asleep in his stroller beside them. Thank you for today. Michelle's voice quiet, tired. He'll remember this, someday. David shook his head. He won't remember. He's won. We'll remember then. We'll tell him. About his first birthday. About how happy he was. David reached across the table. Michelle met him halfway, hands linking. I've been thinking, Michelle started. Stopped. Started again. About us. David's heart kicked. Yeah? About how we're doing this co-parenting thing, how it's working, how you show up every time, no matter what. David waited. Michelle's grip tightened. I'm ready. Ready for what? To try. Us. Not marriage. Not moving back in. Just dating. Slow. See where it goes. David's chest expanded, like breathing for the first time in years. You sure? Michelle nodded. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. David stood, walked around the table, pulled Michelle to her feet, kissed her. Not desperate, not hungry, just honest. Lips meeting, hands gentle, taking their time. Michelle kissed back, hands sliding to his shoulders, holding on. When they pulled apart, David pressed his forehead to hers. Slow. Michelle smiled. Very slow. They stood there. Restaurant empty, Isaiah sleeping. Chicago night quiet outside, building something new, something neither planned, something that felt like coming home. 2 years later, federal courthouse, different reason. Michelle and David standing before a judge, Isaiah between them, 3 years old, fidgeting in his tiny suit. Christopher beside them, witness, friend, family. Judge read the paperwork. Mr. Jones, Ms. Martin, you're asking to formalize custody arrangement? David nodded. Joint custody, equal time, equal say. Judge looked at Michelle. Ms. Martin, you agree? Michelle's hand found David's. I do. And you're both committed to co-parenting? To putting your child first? Both answered together. Yes. Judge smiled. First time David had seen a judge smile. Then I approve. Joint custody granted. Congratulations. Papers were signed. Official. Legal. Isaiah was theirs. Together. Outside. Spring again. Chicago warming after another winter. Isaiah ran ahead, chasing pigeons, laughing when they flew away. Michelle leaned against David. We did it. David's arm around her shoulders. Yeah, we did. Think we'll ever get remarried? David considered. Maybe. If that's what you want. Michelle looked up at him. What do I want? You want to know we'll be okay, that we won't fall apart again, that this time we'll choose each other every day. Michelle's eyes shimmered. How do you know that? Because I want the same thing. They walked, following Isaiah, watching him explore his world, fearless, loved. Michelle stopped, pulled David to face her. I love you, just so you know. First time she'd said it, since everything, since the lie, since the truth. David's throat closed. I love you too. Even though I broke us, you didn't break us. You saved us. Took me a while to understand the difference. Michelle kissed him, right there on the sidewalk. Isaiah giggling nearby, people walking past, nobody caring. Just two people who'd been through hell, made it out the other side. Scarred but whole. David pulled back. Move in with me. Michelle blinked. What? Not the penthouse. Somewhere new. Somewhere that's ours. All three of us. Michelle searched his face. You mean it? Never meant anything more. Michelle laughed, cried, nodded. Okay. Yes, let's do it. Isaiah ran back, grabbed their hands. Ice cream? David scooped him up. Ice cream it is. They walked. Family. Imperfect. Real. Fighting their way back to each other one day at a time. Because forgiveness is earned, not demanded. And some people are worth fighting for, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. 6 months later. New house, Lincoln Park. Not as big as the penthouse. Not as small as Michelle's apartment. Just right. Isaiah's room painted blue. David's office with actual doors. Michelle's studio for the non-profit she'd started, helping other extortion victims, using her story to give others hope. Backyard with a swing set. Fence high enough for privacy, low enough to see neighbors. Home, real home, built from pieces neither thought would fit. Opening night, no party, no guests, just the three of them. Pizza on paper plates. Isaiah's face covered in sauce. Michelle laughing. David taking pictures he'd look at for years. After Isaiah was asleep, David found Michelle on the back porch. Stars visible despite city lights. Rare, clear night. He sat beside her, handed her wine. She took it, sipped. "I've been thinking about something you said." Michelle's voice quiet, thoughtful. "About how I saved you." David waited. "I think we saved each other. You could have walked away when you found out the truth. Could have taken Isaiah. Could have made my life hell. But you didn't. You showed up every day, even when I pushed you away." David's hand found hers. "That's what you do when you love someone." Michelle turned, looked at him in the porch light. The people who seem coldest are often protecting the ones they love most. David recognized his own words, thrown back at him, truth reflected. "Yeah," he whispered, "they are." Michelle set down her wine, moved closer, curled into his side. His arm came around her, automatic, natural. They sat there, watching stars, listening to crickets, feeling the weight of 2 years, the fight, the healing, the choosing each other again and again. "Thank you," Michelle whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up. On me, on us, on the idea that broken things can be fixed." David kissed the top of her head. "Some things are worth fighting for." Inside, Isaiah cried, brief, then settled, learning to self-soothe. Michelle stood, checked anyway. Mom instinct. Came back smiling. "He's fine. Just dreaming." David pulled her back down. "Good dreams, I hope." "The best kind." Michelle settled against him. "The kind where everyone he loves is safe." They stayed until the stars faded, until exhaustion pulled them inside, until real life called them back. But for those moments, they were just two people who'd survived the worst, built something better from the wreckage, learned that love isn't about never falling apart. It's about choosing to rebuild, again and again, as many times as it takes. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. Have you ever misjudged someone and later realized you were wrong, or been judged unfairly yourself? Don't judge someone's story by the scene you walk into. You're only seeing one frame of a much longer film. The pregnant waitress might be a hero. The cold ex-wife might be saving your life. The person who seems furthest from you might be fighting hardest for you. David learned that, almost too late. Almost lost everything because he didn't ask the right questions. Don't make his mistake. Fight for truth. Fight for the people you love, especially when it's hard, because the people worth having are always worth fighting for. Michelle chose David's life over her own comfort, chose his freedom over her pride, chose to be the villain in his story if it meant keeping him safe. That's love, not the easy kind, the kind that costs everything. And David chose to see her, finally, to understand that sometimes the cruelest actions come from the deepest love. Power means nothing if you use it to build walls instead of bridges. David built an empire, but he almost lost his family. Now he knows. Success isn't about bank accounts. It's about who shows up when your son is fighting for his life, who holds your hand when the world falls apart, who rebuilds with you when everything's broken. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. Ronald and Timothy went to prison. But David and Michelle had to restore what they destroyed. Trust, love, family. That part took longer, hurt more, mattered most. Real reconciliation isn't about grand gestures. It's showing up every day and proving you mean it. David showed up, again and again, until Michelle believed him, until she believed in them. Share your story in the comments. The time you misjudged someone. The time someone fought for you when you didn't know they were fighting. The time you almost gave up but didn't. And if this moved you, subscribe. Because these are the stories that remind us it's never too late to make things right. David and Michelle sitting on their porch, Isaiah asleep inside, stars overhead, two people who'd been through hell, made it out scarred but whole. David's voice quiet. I almost lost my son, almost lost the love of my life, because I didn't ask the right questions. Michelle's hand in his. But you found your way back. We found our way back. Chicago night around them. City breathing, moving forward, same as they were, finding their way, together, slow, the way it was always meant to be.